The sea could be heard, even when the windows were shut. A slow, endless sound, waves folding into each other. Soft as breath, in a small room above the harbor, a man sat before an empty canvas. The light was thin that morning, stretched through salt-streaked glass, touching the edges of a half-finished painting. The smell of turpentine and ocean air drifted together, and dust floated like quiet snow in the stillness. His name was Eliang. He had painted for most of his life, though no one in the town could say when they'd last seen him sell a piece. Some said he lived off old savings. Others thought he had none at all. But everyone agreed on one thing: his paintings were beautiful and a little strange. They said the colors in his work moved when no one watched, that a painting of the sea changed with the real tide, that the faces he painted sometimes blinked. Elian never denied it. He only smiled when people spoke that way, and went back to his studio. He had no apprentices, no friends close enough to visit, no gallery. Only this room high above the gray harbor, where gulls cried like echoes of lost things. On the wall hung 5 old canvases, each one covered in sheets of cloth, as if sleeping Dot. Sometimes at night, he thought he could hear them breathing. That morning, he sat for a long time, brush motionless in hand. His mind was blank, not with peace, but with something emptier, quieter. The kind of stillness that came after you've forgotten what you were waiting for. He closed his eyes. For a moment, the sound of the sea faded, and he thought of the painting he had finished the night before. A picture of a small wooden boat drifting into mist Dot when he woke that morning. The real boat in the harbor, the same one he had painted, was gone. Not broken, not stolen. Gone. No one in town remembered it had ever existed. He rose slowly and crossed the room, opening the window. The wind touched his face like an old friend, cool and carrying the scent of rain. On the table lay an old watch, stopped at a time he never fixed. A single brush rested beside it, its tip darkened with blue. He looked at the blank canvas again. He didn't know what he was about to paint, but his hands moved on their own, slow, steady, like remembering a song he hadn't heard in years. The first stroke landed, a line of pale blue. Then another, a little darker. The sound of the brush against canvas was the only sound in the world, and outside, far below, the tide began to shift, pulling the sea backward, against its own rhythm. Asterisk, when Elian stopped painting, the room had changed. The light felt heavier, as if the air itself remembered something he didn't. He set the brush down carefully. The canvas showed only faint waves, a horizon painted in 2 shades of blue. Nothing more. Still, he felt that quiet pull again, that strange heaviness behind his ribs. Outside, the sound of gulls had softened. The world was holding its breath. He leaned closer to the painting. The blue looked wet, though it had dried. He touched it with one finger. Cool, almost cold, later that day, when he stepped out to the harbor for bread and oil, he noticed the sea. The water near the docks had receded far more than it should have. Small boats tilted awkwardly on the sand, ropes sagging, gulls circling the exposed rocks. No one else seemed to notice. Children played near the water's edge as if nothing had changed. The fishermen drank tea, laughing in the shade. Elian stood there, watching. His mind flickered back to his painting, the one with the pale blue horizon, the retreating tide. He felt a quiet ache behind his eyes. At the baker's, the woman behind the counter smiled at him. "You look pale, Elian. Been painting again?" He nodded. "Your hands," she said, frowning. "They're blue." He looked down. The tips of his fingers were stained, not with pigment, but with something that shimmered faintly, like reflection. He rubbed them, but it didn't come off when he returned to his studio. The smell of salt and paint wrapped around him again. The sea wind pressed against the window. The canvas waited, the color deeper now, as if alive. He sat, trying to remember the last time he'd painted something that didn't change the world outside. Maybe years ago, maybe never. He stared at the covered paintings along the wall. Each one marked a moment. The storm that vanished too soon. The night sky that gained an extra star. The ship that should have sunk but didn't. He had tried not to think about it, but he knew. Every time he finished a painting, something somewhere shifted. Small things first, a memory gone, a shadow moved, a familiar face forgotten now, it seemed. Even the sea was listening. He sat back, brushing dust from his shirt, and looked at the canvas again. The horizon was darker now, as if something beneath the water was beginning to wake. Asterisk, that night, the wind turned colder. The sound of the waves had changed to slower, deeper, like something vast was breathing beneath the surface. Elian couldn't sleep. He sat by the window with a lamp beside him, the flame trembling in the draft. The town was dark and still. Even the harbor lights had dimmed, swallowed by the mist rolling in from the sea. On his table, the canvas waited, the same faint horizon. Now, carrying a thin shadow just below the waterline. He hadn't painted that. He leaned closer. The shadow curved softly, like the back of something rising. He pressed his fingers to the edge of the frame. The paint was dry. Yet, when he listened carefully, he could swear he heard water moving inside the canvas, gentle waves, lapping against unseen stone. By morning, the tide had pulled back even farther. The harbor's wooden walkway stood over bare ground, slick with seaweed. In the distance, something glimmered, smooth, stone-like shapes, half buried in sand. The townspeople gathered along the docks, confused but calm, their voices carried by the wind. Never seen the sea this far back. Someone said, maybe a storm's coming. Elian stood apart, hands hidden in his coat pockets, staring. The stones out there were too straight, too even. They looked like walls. Back in his studio, he uncovered one of the older paintings, a portrait of a woman by the shore, her hair caught in the wind. The date scratched on the back read 9 years ago. He remembered painting her. Her name had been Lyra, a visitor who never stayed long. She had asked him once why he painted the sea so often. He'd told her it was because it never stayed the same. She'd laughed. Neither do you. So you left soon after. He never saw her again. He ran his thumb over the paint, tracing the faint curve of her face. When he looked again, the portrait was different. The woman's eyes were closed now, and the waves behind her were gone. He set the canvas down gently, his pulse steady but cold. The air in the studio felt heavy, as if time itself had thickened. Outside, a faint rumble rolled from the horizon. Elian turned toward the new painting, the one with the blue horizon. The shadow beneath the water had grown larger. He whispered, almost to himself, "What are you trying to remember?" But there was no answer, only the low hum of the sea returning to a rhythm older than his own life. The morning light came soft and gray, spilling across the harbor like a sheet of smoke. Elian opened his window to it, and the smell of wet sand rose up, rich, heavy, full of something ancient. The sea was still far out. From his high window, he could see where the water had once been. The seafloor stretched wide and strange, dotted with pale stones, half-swallowed arches, and what looked like the skeleton of an old pier. He watched people wander down there, small as dots, their voices faint against the emptiness. Some picked shells, some stared. Others seemed uneasy, as if the world had tilted slightly without warning. Elian couldn't move. He felt it, the same quiet ache in his chest, that pull behind his ribs that came every time the world shifted because of him. He glanced at the new painting on his easel. The waterline in the picture had drawn back even farther overnight, revealing dark ruins beneath the waves, a reflection of what he saw now, only older, grander. By noon, he was walking the exposed seabed. The sand was damp beneath his boots. The air felt thick, holding a weight that wasn't weather. He came to a wall, wide, smooth stone, carved with faint lines like ripples, frozen in time. His hand traced the surface. The carvings were unfamiliar, yet hauntingly familiar. Spirals, shapes that echoed his own brushstrokes. The wall seemed to hum softly. Just below, hearing, he crouched, brushing the sand away from a corner. Beneath it, an engraving. Everything forgotten waits beneath the tide. He froze. He didn't know how, but he'd painted those same words years ago. Hidden in the background of a seascape no one had ever seen. The tide should have returned by evening, but it didn't. The sea stayed distant, flat, and silent under the reddening sky. Back in his studio, he lit a lamp. The light wavered, catching the edge of every unfinished canvas. He uncovered the latest one. The shadow beneath the water had grown taller, clearer, almost like a tower rising. He stared at it for a long time. His heartbeat matched the rhythm of the waves. He couldn't hear anymore. He spoke softly into the stillness. "I'm not painting the sea, am I?" The lamplight flickered. The air seemed to tighten. No answer came, but the faint sound of dripping water began inside the room, slow and steady, as though the ocean had found its way back through the paint. He stayed awake until dawn, listening. Each drop echoed differently, some hollow, some sharp, some soft. It almost sounded like words trying to form, or like someone remembering how to speak after years of silence. When light touched the window again, Elian realized something that made his hands tremble. He wasn't painting what was happening. He was painting what had already happened long ago, before the sea claimed it. And now, with each stroke, the past was surfacing again. Asterisk, the morning broke pale and soundless. No gulls, no tide. Only the slow hiss of wind sweeping through the hollow bay. Elian walked toward the open sea again, following the old harbor path. The ground was cracked where the water used to lap against stone. His boots sank slightly into damp earth. He carried a satchel with sketch paper, charcoal, and a flask of water. The same tools he'd always brought when painting outside. But this time, it felt like he was being pulled, not to paint, but to remember. The ruins stretched far now. Walls leaned out of the sand like tired bones. A few arches still stood, half buried and glinting with wet moss. What had looked like a broken pier from above was actually a row of marble columns. Elian brushed off the nearest one. The stone felt too smooth, too deliberate. The carvings were deep and flowing, curves upon curves, like waves folding into one another. He traced one with his fingertip, and his breath caught. The pattern wasn't random. It was his handwriting. Not words, not letters, but the same loops and curls he used to sign his old paintings. He stepped back, dizzy. His name was written across the stone. Not painted, etched, weathered by centuries. He walked farther. The ruins grew larger, forming streets that seemed half familiar. Narrow alleys cut between low walls. In one spot, he found a stairway descending into darkness. Water shimmered faintly at the bottom. He hesitated, then stepped down. The air changed, cool and close. Each breath carried the smell of salt and stone. The last few steps were slick, covered in seaweed. He crouched and touched the water. It was colder than the air. For a moment, he saw his reflection ripple, but the face, looking back, wasn't his own. Older, tired. Watching him, he jerked back, splashing the silence apart, above ground again. He sat on a fallen column to steady his breath. The horizon shimmered faintly, as though the sea was waiting just out of sight. Holding its breath too, he opened his sketchbook. His hand moved before he could think. Lines appeared, the stairs, the arches, the faint shadow of the tower beneath the water. Then, unbidden, another image, a city alive. Bright lights, flowing banners, people walking streets of white stone. He stopped. The drawing looked too sure, too practiced. Every detail precise, every corner known. Like he had lived there once. By dusk, he stood at the heart of the ruins. A wide plaza opened before him, ringed with toppled statues and cracked pillars. At the center lay a circular fountain, now filled with sand. He knelt, brushed it clean. The base held another inscription. The same curved symbols, but now the meaning seemed clear. He could almost read it. He whispered what came to mind. The city remembers the hands that shaped it. The ground trembled lightly beneath him, then stopped. Elian closed his eyes. He could hear faint whispers beneath the sand, like breath moving through the stone itself, patient, waiting. He didn't know if it was the sea or something older, but he knew now that the city wasn't lost. It had been waiting for him to return. Asterisk, the next morning arrived muted, as if the sun hesitated before rising. The world felt thinner, stretched between two times, one alive, one long gone. Elian woke near the plaza. He had slept with his sketchbook open beside him, though he didn't remember drawing the last page. It showed a tower, tall, spiraled, crowned by light, and beneath it, two figures standing close, one holding a brush, the other a flame. He stared at it for a long time, then closed the book carefully, as if not to disturb something fragile inside. He began exploring the deeper parts of the ruins. Here, the sand grew darker, damp with traces of old tides. Everywhere he looked, fragments of color clung stubbornly to the stone, deep blue paint still visible in the carvings. Bits of gold leaf catching the dim light. He found what must have been a wall once, covered in cracked murals. Faces stared back through chipped pigment. Men and women with calm eyes, painted beside scenes of the sea rising high. The city glowing beneath it. In the center of the mural was a figure holding a brush. The strokes were faint but sure, the detail unmistakable. It was him. He stepped back, heart pounding softly. The air carried a faint hum, not sound exactly, but a vibration through the soles of his feet, like a memory waking up. He touched the mural again. The paint was warm. Then he heard a voice, not aloud, but inside, where thoughts echoed deeper. "You promised to return before the tide." He froze. The words weren't clear, but they lingered, a whisper just beneath his heartbeat. He turned, scanning the ruins. Nothing but quiet wind. Still, the message pulsed inside him, "before the tide." He didn't understand what it meant, but the air seemed to grow heavier each time he repeated it. By late afternoon, he reached the far edge of the city, where stone gave way to smooth, glass-like rock. A narrow trench cut across the ground, leading down toward what looked like a buried chamber. Eliane descended, slowly, one hand brushing the wall for balance. The light dimmed, replaced by a soft, bluish glow from the stones themselves. He came into a round room. The air was still. The walls were covered with carvings of waves folding into each other, all leading toward a single panel at the far end. The panel showed a city swallowed by water. But instead of destruction, there was calm. Figures stood beneath the surface, eyes open, serene, their hair floating like seagrass, and beneath them, an inscription: "The city sleeps in reflection until the painter returns." He stood there for a long time, unable to breathe. The phrase repeated itself inside him. It was too exact to be coincidence. He placed his hand on the carving, and the glow beneath the stone brightened. Spreading outward in ripples, the walls responded. Colors began to bloom faintly through the cracks, pale golds, washed-out blues like light through shallow water. Eliane stumbled back, the ground trembling softly. When the light steadied, he saw something at the center of the floor. Half buried in the dust lay an object, a small glass vial, filled with dried pigment, the same deep blue he used long ago in a painting he'd never finished. He picked it up carefully. The glass was cool and faintly humming. Something inside him whispered again, clearer this time, "before the tide." He pocketed the vial, heart steady now. The city wasn't trying to frighten him. It was reminding him. Somewhere in these ruins waited the reason he had once painted the sea, and the promise he had forgotten to keep. he had forgotten to keep. The next day, clouds gathered far off the coast, heavy and slow. The wind carried the scent of rain. Real rain this time, not the dry wind of memory. Ilian walked back through the streets. Now that he knew what to look for, he saw patterns everywhere, the way each wall curved toward a single center point. How every road seemed to spiral inward. The city wasn't built at random. It was built around something, a tower. He followed the spiral path until the sand began to slope upward again. What he had thought was a cliff was actually the buried base of a massive structure. Its shape barely visible through the layers of dust and rock. Smooth stone walls curved inward like an hourglass. Then, rising again, he stood in front of it, quiet. The wind moved through gaps in the upper stone, creating a faint, hollow note, the kind of sound that lingers after someone speaks. He placed a hand against the surface, cold but alive, under his fingers. Faint ridges formed a familiar pattern, brush strokes, swirling in a rhythm only he could have made. It hit him then. He had painted this place, not imagined it, painted it. He walked around the base, looking for a way in. The entrance appeared half-collapsed, blocked by sand and shards of marble. He dug with his hands until he uncovered a narrow passage. The air inside was cool and damp, thick with a smell of stone that had never seen the sun. He lit a small candle from his pack. The flame flickered against walls covered with murals, faint outlines of stars, waves, and faces that looked up toward the surface. Each face shared something familiar. His brush lines, his color sense, his style. This was his work, but older, ancient. Halfway up the inner stair, he found a wide landing. A stone pedestal stood at the center, holding a shallow bowl filled with water. The surface shimmered faintly, though there was no light above. He crouched beside it, peering in. At first, it showed only his reflection. Then the image shifted, water rippling without touch, and a scene unfolded beneath it. The same tower, but whole. The sea rose around it, glowing gold in twilight. People walked across bridges of glass and coral, carrying vessels of light. And high above, on the tower's terrace, stood a man painting the sky. His back was turned, but the strokes were his own. Elian's breath caught. The painter turned slightly, enough for him to see his face. It was his. The vision rippled, fading away. He gripped the bowl, heart thudding softly. The words from before echoed again. Before the tide. It made sense now. This city had been his canvas once. He had painted it into being, shaping every arch and color. But something had gone wrong. Something that drowned it. And before the tide came, he had made a promise, one he never returned to keep. He climbed higher, The stairs wound endlessly upward until they opened into a wide chamber with broken windows looking out toward the horizon. There, the air felt different, charged, expectant. He saw faint traces of blue pigment staining the floor. Drawn into circles, at the room's center stood a single chair carved from pale stone. On it rested a rolled canvas, sealed with a thin layer of wax. Elian reached out and touched it. The wax cracked easily under his thumb. Inside lay a half-finished painting, a city glowing beneath waves. Light flickering through the surface, peaceful and unbroken dot at the bottom. A signature, E. Varel. Before the tide, he felt the room breathe around him, as if time had recognized its owner. He looked out through the broken windows. The sea shimmered faintly in the distance, as though waiting for its cue to rise again. Whatever had happened here wasn't over, and somewhere in the unfinished painting, he knew, lay the way to set it right. He rolled the canvas carefully and tucked it under his arm, then whispered into the quiet tower, "I'm here now." The wind answered softly, like the city exhaling after a long sleep. Asterisk, that night, sleep never came. Elian sat beneath the open arches of the tower, the half-finished canvas beside him. The moon hung low, round and white, its light trembling across the ruins. He listened to the silence, but beneath it, a faint sound stirred, not wind this time, a pulse, slow and deep, like the heartbeat of the sea. He leaned forward, looking toward the horizon. The line between sand and water had vanished. The tide was coming back. By morning, the air was damp and heavy. Mist rolled in from the distant shore, spreading across the streets like a soft flood. Elian walked through it, feeling grains of sand stick to his boots. The city seemed to be waking, light catching on broken glass, stone sighing under warmth. And in that shifting haze, the edges of buildings wavered, as if the world couldn't decide whether to stay stone or memory. He passed the fountain again, the one he'd brushed clean days ago. Now, faint ripples formed across the sand inside it. The water was seeping back through cracks, slow and patient. He knelt beside it. Something small glimmered beneath the rising layer, a pendant shaped like a tiny brush. He picked it up. The metal was dark with age, but a single blue stone remained at its center, the same shade as his pigment as he turned it in his hand. Another voice came soft, like breath across water. "You said the tide would never take us. You promised." He froze. The voice was close, yet no one stood there. The mist thickened. Figures began to take shape within it. Faint, translucent outlines. People walking through the old streets, carrying baskets, leading children, laughing without sound. Their movements were smooth, like scenes replayed in slow motion. And though they passed close to him, they never saw him. He whispered to one of them, "Who are you?" The figure turned for a moment. Her eyes glowed faintly blue. Then she faded back into the mist, leaving only the scent of salt. Elian stumbled back, clutching the pendant. His thoughts spun between fear and recognition. The people weren't ghosts. They were memories, brushstrokes caught between worlds, pieces of his painting still alive, replaying what he once created. And as the tide returned, those fragments were waking again. He felt it now, not as fear, but responsibility. This city had trusted him to finish what he began, to keep it from vanishing when the water came. But he had left. He had let it drown. By noon, the mist reached his knees. The streets shimmered under a thin sheet of water, reflecting the sky in broken patterns. He climbed back toward the tower, knowing the answer waited somewhere inside. When he reached the chamber again, the water had already touched the first step. He unrolled the canvas once more and spread it across the floor. The unfinished city glowed faintly under the light. He dipped his finger into the vial of blue pigment. The dust trembled inside the glass, then flowed like liquid as soon as it touched his skin. The tower lights flickered. He touched the brush marks on the painting, and the surface rippled, just like the bowl of water had before. Through that shimmer, he saw the city below, alive again, waiting. He whispered, "If I painted you once, I can bring you back." The pigment glowed softly, coating his hands in light. He placed them on the canvas. For a heartbeat, everything stilled: air, water, time. Then the floor shook gently, a deep note rising through the stone. Outside, the mist parted. The tide rolled in faster now, curling through the streets, washing dust from forgotten carvings. And beneath the water's rise, faint light stirred, soft, blue, spreading through the ruins like memory returning to a dream. Elian didn't move. He kept his hands on the canvas, eyes closed, breathing slow. He wasn't painting now. He was remembering. Every brushstroke he had once made, every promise, every moment the sea had stolen. And the city, it was listening. It was listening. By dawn, the tide had reached the plaza. Elian stood at the tower's base, the water gliding around his boots, calm as silk. The city was no longer ruins, not entirely. Light shimmered under the surface. Faint outlines of bridges, towers, and domes forming beneath the water. When the waves passed, the old stone vanished. When they calmed, the shapes returned again, like two worlds overlapping. He took a step forward. The water rose to his knees, cool and smooth. And with that touch came a pull, soft, but certain. Not danger, invitation. He waded deeper. Every step felt like walking through a memory. Voices drifted faintly through the ripples. Laughter, market calls, the clatter of distant footsteps. Then he saw it, a reflection that didn't match the world above. Where the plaza should have been cracked and bare, another city glowed below, whole, radiant, alive. He blinked, unsure which was real. Then the water lifted gently around him, pulling him down without struggle, as if it had been waiting all this time. He sank quietly. There was no cold, no panic, only a vast stillness filled with soft light. He opened his eyes. He was standing now, somehow breathing. Inside the city, as it had once been, streets of polished glass, banners of silk swaying in slow motion. People walking past him as though time had softened into a dream. The sea above shimmered faintly, distant like a ceiling made of light. A young woman brushed past him, carrying a jar of glowing pigment. She smiled when she saw him, though her voice came like an echo through water. "You came back." Elian froze. Her face was familiar, not from memory, but from his art. She was the one he had painted again and again, without knowing why. The woman by the shore, the one who always stood just before the tide. He whispered, "Who are you?" She tilted her head, faint light tracing her features. "The one who waited." "You called me Myra." The name hit him like warmth. Myra. He had said it once, whispered it when finishing a portrait long ago, though he never remembered why. She took his hand and led him through the glowing streets. Around them, people were painting the air, brushstrokes floating mid-water, forming small scenes and colors that shimmered for a while, then faded. The city was alive with creation, every surface breathing color. "This was our home," Mira said softly. "You painted it to keep us safe, to hold the light before the sea took it." Elian looked around, voice breaking. "But I left." She nodded, eyes kind but tired. "The tide came sooner than you knew. You promised to return before it fell." She looked upward, where the shimmer of the ocean ceiling glowed faintly. "You never did." So the city waited. Elian stopped walking. The truth pressed against his chest like a deep ache. He looked down at his hands, faintly glowing from the pigment still soaked into his skin. "I remember now," he whispered. "I wanted to finish the painting, to make it eternal. But the storm came first. I thought I'd have time." "You did," she said, "just not in the same lifetime." He looked at her, confusion softening into realization. The city hadn't called him by chance. It had called him back through time, through dream, through the memory of what he once created to finish. It gleamed faintly under the blue light. The same place he had stood centuries ago, with his brush raised toward the sea. Mira turned to him. The tide rises again. You must paint the last stroke. Only then can the city rest. Elian nodded slowly, eyes fixed on the horizon. He understood now. This wasn't about saving the city. It was about completing the promise, so it could finally sleep. He looked toward the tower, where the brush still waited, preserved within light, untouched by time. The water above rippled softly, as if time itself was counting the last moments before the tide fully returned. He took a slow breath and whispered, "Then let it be finished." Asterisk, the sea shimmered above like a second sky. Light fell through it in broken ribbons, gliding across the glass towers and stone arches of the city. Elian stood at the foot of the great tower, the same one he had seen buried under centuries of sand. Now it was whole again, silent, waiting. Mira walked beside him, her steps soundless in the water. The pendant he had found earlier hung from her neck, the small, brush-shaped charm glowing faintly, pulsing with the same rhythm as his heartbeat. She looked up at the tower and then at him. "It's still yours," she said softly. "Every line, every color. You gave it to us once. Now finish it and let it rest." Elian nodded. He touched the base of the tower and felt warmth, a pulse traveling through stone, memory alive beneath his fingertips. He began to climb Dot. Inside, the tower's walls were covered in his work, scenes painted in the way only memory could create. Half real, half dream. Children laughing near a blue-lit fountain. A woman painting the sky with her fingers. The city shining just before the tide came in. He paused at each one, running his hand across the paint. Every image was him, the joy, the fear, the promise, and behind them, the faint shimmer of the ocean waited. When he reached the top, the chamber was open to the sea. Water hovered above like glass, held back by some unseen force. Beyond it, sunlight rippled, turning everything gold. At the center of the floor stood an easel, and resting on it, his brush. He approached slowly. The brush looked untouched, as if it had been waiting all this time. When he picked it up, it felt warm. The bristles still soft, still stained with blue. The canvas before him was blank, but as he held the brush near it, faint outlines began to appear, sketches of waves, light, faces. The final piece, he dipped the brush into the vial he'd carried. The blue pigment flowed like liquid fire, swirling with light dot. Mira stood behind him, quiet. The city's hum grew louder, echoing through the walls. He raised the brush and began to paint. Each stroke felt alive, waves curling upward, light bending in slow spirals. The city beneath, glowing brighter dot with every line, the world shifted. The buildings below flickered between ruin and memory, between sand and life. The water trembled, rising, then falling again. Elian painted faster now, guided by something beyond sight, a memory deeper than time. His hands glowed faintly with the pigment's light, and when he breathed, the air shimmered. He saw Mira watching, her face calm. "Don't stop," she said. "The sea is listening." The final stroke was small, a single curve of light at the edge of the horizon. But when it touched the canvas, the tower shuddered softly. Outside, the sea moved. The waves rolled upward, slow and massive, not in destruction, but in return, wrapping the city in calm, folding it into stillness. Light spread outward in rings, touching every wall, every stone, every forgotten mural. The voices that had whispered through the ruins now sang, low and distant. Elian dropped the brush. The water around him shimmered, rising gently past his knees, his chest, his shoulders, until everything was quiet again. He opened his eyes. He stood once more in the ruins above the surface. The tide lapped softly at his feet, warm and clear. The city was gone beneath him, not lost, but resting. He looked toward the horizon. The sea glowed faintly, a deep blue light pulsing below the waves. Only peace. Mira's voice came faintly on the wind, gentle, fading. "You came back before the tide." He smiled. "I kept my promise." The wind moved across the bay, soft and endless. And for a moment, he thought he saw the city's reflection glimmer just beneath the waterhole. Alive, dreaming again. Dreaming again.